What's up, guys? How's it going? So I just want to share my thoughts on overcoming lust, um, and just kind of share what I've learned in my life, and just hope this helps y'all in your journeys, and sure it'll help me as well, talking about it. Um, but yeah, with overcoming lust, I mean, one of the first things that comes to mind is just being spiritually minded, just as the scriptures say. Being spiritually minded. So like, for example, committing to following Christ, being a disciple of Christ, and, really getting into covenant with God to keep his commandments, and um, just, yeah, focusing on it, focusing every day on being spiritually minded and praying to the Lord to help you to be spiritually minded, to help you to overcome lust, and to have that spiritual purpose in your life to follow Christ and build up the Lord's kingdom. So that's definitely like one of the main fundamental things that come to mind when it comes to overcoming lust. Like, no doubt. Like, I cannot go wrong with saying that. Like, being spiritually minded, following Christ, having that spiritual purpose, you know. And then another thing I've realized that I've learned is just recognizing that, every time you've made that mistake of like giving into using porn and masturbation, you always ended up regretting it, right? Like, at least for me, I don't know about you guys, but at least for me, I'm sure you guys too, whoever's listening to this, like, every single time I ended up viewing porn, masturbation, all that kind of stuff, I always ended up regretting it. There's not one single time that I did not regret it. And like, it's always been like a lot of regret, like a lot of pain and negative consequences and regret, you know? Like, and I'm not even just talking about like a little bit of regret, like, oh, I kind of regret doing that, but it was kind of worth it. No, no, no. Like, really heavy regret. Like, there's definitely negative consequences to giving into this temptation, to giving into lust, pornography, and all that. There was not one single time, I do not remember one single time where I gave into that temptation and I didn't regret it. Just think about that. And I've made that mistake. Like, I will humbly admit, I have made that mistake many times. Many times, and there was not one single time where I did not regret it. It was always regret, and even a lot of regret, So it's, just remember that, remember that. And that when it comes to sex, when it comes to sexuality, the only time that there's not pain and regret and remorse, and it's meant to be this way, is when you are bonding with your marriage partner, when you're being intimate with the woman you love, when you're bonding with her, or you're procreating, or you're trying to procreate, you're like trying to make a baby. Those are the only cases where sexual type stuff, those are the only cases where it doesn't involve pain and regret. Anything else outside of that, porn, masturbation, sex outside of marriage, it always involves pain and regret and remorse. Always. Now, me personally, I have been granted the huge blessing of not making the mistake of having sex outside of marriage. I have not had sex outside of marriage. Thank God. By the grace of God, I have not made that mistake. But based off of what I've heard from other people, and I'm sure some of you guys listening to this have made that mistake, you could verify it's not worth it. Based off of what I've heard from other people, and I've listened to people's testimonies, experiences of like how much they regret making that mistake. It's not worth it. It is absolutely not worth it. All this kind of stuff, porn, masturbation, hooking up, random hookups, all that kind of stuff, it's always pain and regret. That's always the end result. And that's always that's the thing that has the most influence, is the negative consequences. Like the pleasure and the peace that comes from it is very, very fleeting and temporary. But the most influential thing when it comes to all this deviant sexuality is pain and regret and misfortune. That's always the most influential thing. That's always the bigger picture. That's always the end result. Pain and regret. And that's kind of what I've learned. Those are kind of some big things I've learned when it comes to overcoming lust. And the former life coach, Gabe Dog, he's put it this way. Gabriel Bocanegra, those of you who are familiar with him, he's put it this way. Porn masturbation is a piece of shit painted gold. I don't normally say cuss words, but this is one of those times where I feel like it's appropriate to say a cuss word. Pornography, deviant sexuality, masturbation, hookup culture, it's shit painted gold. It's an illusion. And yeah, these are the things to remember. You got to remember these things. If you don't truly remember the truth, if you're not in alignment with the truth, and if you don't remember the truth, you're not going to be able to successfully overcome lust. You have to remember the truth, that this stuff is always just going to lead to pain and regret. You're always just going to end up regretting it. Right? And even a lot of regret. Even a lot of pain and regret. So you got to remember this. And yeah, that's all I want to say, guys. Hope this helps. Thanks for tuning in.